everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some Bermuda travel tips and information. But before I get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the little bell to be notified of future travel videos from my channel. Let's jump right into the tips. These are things that I learned through my own experience exploring the island, and I hope they can be helpful to you if you're planning your own trip to Bermuda. Tip number 1, Bermuda is quite expensive. They have to import most of their goods and materials, so things like a loaf of bread or a bag of sugar are much higher than you would pay back in Canada or the US. These prices are also reflected in how much things cost at restaurants and stores. If you're renting a car, gasoline is way more expensive in Bermuda than it is back in Canada and the US, so keep that in mind when you're budgeting for your trip to Bermuda. Tip number 2 is the currency of the island. The official currency of Bermuda is the Bermudian dollar, but it is on par with the US dollar, so you can use either Bermudian or US dollars wherever you shop on the island. Just note that if you're paying in US dollars, you may only get change back in Bermudian dollars, so just something to note if you're shopping on the island. Tip number 3 is about driving on the island of Bermuda. They drive on the left-hand side there, which is different from Canada and the US. So if you're driving, you want to know that for sure, and if you're a pedestrian, you want to make sure that you're looking right before you cross the street so that you don't get hit by a car. Another interesting thing about Bermuda is that you can rent a Twizy. So if you're not familiar with what a Twizy is, I definitely wasn't before I got there. It's a 2-passenger car. One person sits in the front and someone with really short legs can sit in the back, the 2 seats, and it's completely enclosed so that if it's raining, you're not going to get wet, and you drive it just like you would drive a car. Tip number 4, franchises are not allowed on the island. So if you're looking for a McDonald's or a Starbucks or a Walmart, you won't find it because they're actually not allowed to come to Bermuda. There is one exception, and it is a KFC downtown Hamilton. And the KFC was there before this law came into effect, so it is the only franchise that is on the entire island. The reason they have this law in effect was so that the locals could have their own small businesses, and when people went, they would be able to support the locals rather than supporting a franchise. Tip number 5 is to take public transit. The buses in Bermuda were really easy to navigate. We purchased a day pass that cost us $19 US per person. So if you're planning on taking multiple trips and you'll get your money's worth, then I would definitely recommend buying the day pass. One thing to note is that you cannot buy the day pass on the bus. You can only buy those at designated retailers, including the information centers. If you're just taking a ride here or there, you can pay with exact change on the bus, or you don't have exact change, you just won't get change back. So that's something to note if you're taking the buses, and the routes were very easy to follow, and the buses came at a very frequent pace, so definitely enjoyed the buses, and if we go back, I would take them again. Also, another tip to note if you're taking the bus is do not stand up until the bus comes to a complete stop. I know it's common practice to do that in other countries like Canada and the US, but in Bermuda, people will look at you funny and tell you to sit down because that's not what they do on the island of Bermuda. So make sure you're sitting until the bus comes to a complete stop. The bus driver will let you out, so don't worry about getting stuck on the bus. Tip number 6 is to take a ferry. There are lots of ferries that run to get people to and from cities on the island. And if you're on a cruise, they often offer these ferries for free. So we had 2 options of ferries to take because we were on a Norwegian cruise, and we could go to St. George or Hamilton from the Royal Naval Dockyard and back. We did one from St. George back to the Royal Naval Dockyard, and we got a great view of the island, and it took much less time than it did to take the bus. The next tip is about taxis. There are plenty of taxis on the island, and they can get you to your destination more quickly than a ferry or the bus, but they are more expensive. So just note that if you're planning to go somewhere and you need to get there quickly, a taxi might be your best bet, but it will come at a hefty price compared to the bus or a ferry. You can basically wave a taxi down in any public area on the main streets or in the city, or you can call and reserve your trip. Try and split the cost with some other tourists, or just note that it's going to be more expensive to get to your destination. The next tip I have is about tourist attractions on the island. There are many things to see on the island, like Horseshoe Bay Beach, lots of pink sand beaches actually, the Crystal Caves, the Fantasy Caves. there's lots to see and do on the island, so you won't be bored at all. But one thing I want to point out is that it does get very busy, especially if there's a cruise ship in port, and especially if there are more than one cruise ship there. So if you're trying to see some of the more popular attractions like Horseshoe Bay Beach or the Crystal Caves, you definitely want to get there as early as possible and try and book your tickets in advance if you can, or take an excursion through the cruise ship because they go through much faster than if you go on your own. Another thing to point out is that if you aren't on a cruise ship and you're exploring the island and there are cruises in port that day, you definitely want to get there as early as possible because there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of tourists coming through the tourist attractions because they only have a short time to see the island. So if you can avoid tourist attractions on a day that a cruise ship is in, it would probably be better and you would probably have more fun and a better experience if you explored on a day that there were no cruises in port. My next tip is about Bermuda beaches. So Horseshoe Bay Beach might be the most popular and notable beach on the island. And it is very beautiful with its pink sand, a nice little cove area, and it has lots of amenities for beachgoers. But it also means it's a very popular tourist attraction and gets very busy. So if you're looking for a more quiet beach experience, this might not be the beach for you. I would suggest getting off the beaten path and trying one of the other beaches on the island. There are so many to choose from, and you could be like us and have the entire beach to yourself for the day. So try one of the other beaches and definitely stop by Horseshoe Bay just so you can see how beautiful it is and see some of the amenities, but I definitely recommend trying one of the other beaches on the island. Overall, Bermuda is a fantastic island and I would definitely like to go back in the future. If there's one thing to take away from all of these tips, it would be the cost. Make sure that you do your planning in advance so that there are no surprises and that you set your budget appropriately for your trip. Those are all the tips that I have for you today for the island of Bermuda, and I hope that they can be helpful if you're planning your own trip in the near future. And as always, if you like this video, please consider giving it a like and please subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting more travel related videos in the near future and I hope to have you back.